Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 elections continues. We're interviewing Mr. Tom Chojnacki. He's a Democrat from Lake Mills. He's a candidate in the 38th Assembly District. Tom, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you for having me.
And a programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. First time candidate, Tom?
Yes.
Well, then give us a short version of your background, sir.
Well, let's see. I'll start out with my family. I've been married for 40 years to my wife. We have 4 children and 3 grandchildren. I've been a teacher for the last 10 years and worked in the high-tech industry in several positions for 15 years. Some of those have been Vice President of Manufacturing, Director of Technology, and Senior Scientist. And prior to that, I was a carpenter for 5 years.
And you've been teaching where?
I've been teaching in Cudahy and in Milwaukee.
Okay. Let me talk about your website. On your website, you criticize Governor Walker for not taking federal money for high-speed rail, for not taking federal money for internet to schools, and for Act 10. But you're running against Representative Kleefisch, so connect those dots for me, please.
Well, Kleefisch is basically a rubber stamp for Governor Walker. So if I'm running against Kleefisch, I'm basically running against the policies of Walker.
Okay. Which of these major policy changes that Governor Walker has pushed through do you consider most damaging?
Probably the health care, not accepting the money for the health care.
Why, sir?
Well, if you look at health care, there's the Colorado Hospital Association did a study of 30 states. Wisconsin was not part of it. 15 of them accepted the federal money and 15 did not. The 15 that did not, their statistics flatlined. The 15 that accepted it, 34%, they had a 34% drop in the number of people paying out of pocket for insurance and a 32% drop in the number of charity cases that they had to deal with. On top of that, if you consider that if people have money for health care and their health care bills are less, that means they have more discretionary money. If they have more discretionary money, that means they spend more, which helps our economy, and it also helps tax revenues.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about health care, the American Hospital Association says that Wisconsin has the second lowest Medicaid reimbursement rates in the nation. If you're a member of the Assembly, do you think those reimbursement rates should be raised next budget, sir?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is look at whether or not the rates are covering the costs.
Okay.
I'm a firm believer in people paying for any services that they get or that they're covered. So I would have to look at that and see exactly how that impacts our revenue or our spending and their income, so that my concern is if it's too low, they may be not willing to take in Medicare patients. So we have to do a balance.
But your first priority then would be taking the federal government up on its offer to pay for an expansion of
definitely
our MA benefits.
Yeah, that's actually just a recent study showed that it cost us about $200 million by not taking that money.
Okay. Let's talk about schools. What would you push for in funding our K-12 system in the next budget, sir, if you're a member of the Assembly?
What I'd push for is more funding for our schools from the general revenue and not through property taxes. I think in the past, property taxes was a good way of funding our schools, but I think it's more of a regressive tax at this point. So I would push to get money from our general revenue.
Would you push for a new school aid formula that committed more of our general state funds instead of property taxes?
Yes.
What about the issue of school vouchers and choice? What's your position on that, sir? As you're aware, that in the current budget cycle, it expanded statewide with an enrollment camp of 1,000.
Well, I'm very suspicious of any program that doesn't have any accountability to it, and especially when it comes to taxpayers' money. So at this point, I would say I would freeze it and then revisit it and see whether or not the data that we have currently shows that they don't do any better than public schools, and they're taking money away from public schools. So at this point, I would freeze it and then re-examine what's going on.
So you'd freeze that statewide number at 1,000 for the next biennial budget?
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 weeks ago, Governor Walker, as you know, called for the repeal of Common Core standards. Your position on that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because Common Core was initially put forward by Republicans. And I think what he's doing is trying to distance himself from that just for political reasons. I support Common Core. I've been a teacher for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. I look at Common Core as something that we can use. Well, first of all, students should be able to travel from or move from any school district in the state or even in the country and not be left behind in their studies. It should be a seamless transition for them, and I think Common Core would help that. The other thing is we have to realize that we're no longer competing within the country, we're competing worldwide. So we need to have standards that will help us compete worldwide. Right now we have universities where people are coming from overseas to our world-class universities in this state. Wouldn't it be great if we had secondary and primary schools where people would want to send people from other countries would want to be sending their kids here? We just need to have world-class schools. Not great schools, we have to have world-class schools.
As a teacher, just quickly, what's been the impact of Act 10 on our school system, sir?
What I've seen from Act 10 is a lot of senior teachers leaving for fear of losing their pension and so on. As someone who has been in manufacturing, anytime I look at someone leaving the company, I wonder what sort of institutional knowledge is being lost by the company when that person leaves, and can we make it up? What I see is a lot of senior people leaving in state government and in teaching. What sort of institutional knowledge are we losing, and where are the new teachers coming in? Where are they going to be getting their guidance? A new teacher comes in and it takes them several years before they actually become an effective teacher. So they need that guidance, and we're losing that.
Let's jump to transportation funding. The Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance said, if we continue to spend for transportation at the 2013 level over the next 10 years, we'd be $2 billion short. Do you agree with that assessment? And if there is a deficit, how would you make it up, sir?
I'm not sure I agree with that assessment because I haven't looked at the numbers.
Okay.
But I think one of our problems is that back in, I think it was 2006, they stopped indexing our gas tax to inflation, and I think that's the beginning of our problems with that.
Okay.
I think we should reinstitute that indexing with inflation. The other thing that we have to look at is we can't just look at our infrastructure from a 20th century viewpoint. Right now we have cars that can park themselves. In 10 years or so, we'll have cars that will be able to communicate with each other. I believe that with our existing roads, we will be able to handle a higher volume of traffic. In addition to that, we have cars that are becoming lighter, so that's going to be less wear and tear on the roads. So we have to look at the whole picture and plan for the future as we go forward. I think I would not be opposed to having some of those gains that we get from, let's say, the interstate or our highways, taking some of that money and putting it back into local communities to fix the roads.
You talk about indexing, going back to indexing our gas tax. Since it hasn't been increased, I think you're right, since 2006, should it be increased, or should the $75 that you and I pay to register our vehicles be increased, sir?
I think it should be increased.
Which one, gas or
Well, probably a mix of both.
Okay, okay. From interviewing a number of candidates, I know that medical marijuana is going to be an issue. Do you support that, and do you support the legalizing the recreational use, sir?
Well, if there appears to be medical application for the use of marijuana, and just because there are some people who are against it just for emotional reasons, I don't see any reason why we can't use that for medical applications. I mean, people abuse Vicodin, but we don't take it off the market. People abuse marijuana, but we could use it in the same way that we use Vicodin or any other controlled substance for medical uses. I think it's immoral. If it has a good medical use for people, it's immoral for us not to use that to alleviate pain or whatever.
What about the experiment of Colorado with recreational use? Something you think should be considered?
Well, I think we have Colorado and Washington.
That's right.
Okay. And I think what we ought to do is let them go forward as they are. I mean, we don't have any choice in that, but we can observe what the ramifications are from that. That's an experiment that's going on, and it's something that we could get that information before we make our decision, instead of just making a decision on emotional grounds.
With your science background, do you have a position on the law that passed early in 2013 allowing Giebig taconite to apply for that open pit iron mine in Ashland and Iron counties? Do you think that needs to be amended, sir?
I think it does.
How?
Well, first of all, they've made provisions in that law that only apply to the iron mine and not to any other mine. So you have to question what's going on there. And then on top of that, you look at how much money they have given to the Walker campaign.
Are you talking about that $700,000 gift that was just disclosed over the weekend?
Yes.
That the company gave to the Greater Milwaukee Committee, not to the governor's campaign.
Right. Well, and then the $10,000 that was given to the governor's campaign when he ran initially for governor.
Okay.
And then some of the special provisions, they're expected to produce about, I think it's 90 million tons of waste every year. I might be wrong on the number, but the point is that they made special provisions for them to be able to take those tailings and dump them into rivers and into wetlands. Those tailings will have sulfides in them, and sulfides can cause acidification of water. So we have to look at that. You really have to wonder why we want to risk polluting water that needs to be available in the future for our children. I mean, we look at what's going on in California. We know that the climate's changing. You can't drink iron ore. You can't drink gold. You can't drink oil. The only thing you can drink is water, and we need to preserve our water. So I think it's a mistake to do that. Not only that, but recently The Economist reported that Rio Tinto has just closed a deal with the country of Guinea. And they expect that is tests have shown that that's the best iron ore, purest iron ore discovered so far. Mm-hmm. Once they get that in action or start using that, it's probably going to make that mine in northern Wisconsin obsolete.
I see.
I mean, it's a marginal operation the way it is.
Okay.
So I think we just have to revisit that whole thing.
You have a position on whether first offense jumping subjects, the first offense drunken driving should be a crime?
I think what we need to have is a graduated system for first offense.
Okay.
It's my view that people who drink and drive are not normally caught the first time or second time or third time. So if someone is really inebriated, way over the limit, I think there's got to be some really stiff penalties for that. So I think it's graduated. I think there's some cases where someone just accidentally goes over a little bit, and that may be a ticket or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's a habitual drinker and driver probably is going to be way over the limit anyway out of habit. And so we have to have stiffer fines for that.
And then finally, I want to give you a chance to summarize the differences between you and Representative Clayfish.
Probably the biggest difference is that I plan on being a representative for everybody in the 38th District. He, on the other hand, seems that the essence of representative government is to write laws for individual donors. And that's probably the biggest.
Okay.
I think my background, bringing in my background, I can look at, as a scientist, I look at the data. I don't work on emotion, or try not to work on emotion. And so I'm going to be looking at how we can solve problems based on data, information, as opposed to emotion.
Very good. Thank you. Tom Chojnacki is a Democrat from Lake Mills running in the 38th Assembly District. The election is November 4. Tom, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you.